Welcome to WeCan, Mike Brcic. You are an explorer, an entrepreneur, a facilitator, a speaker, and the founder of Wayfinders, where you create immersive experiences on stage and out in the wild, helping leaders and entrepreneurs gain clarity, courage, and alignment. You take entrepreneurs to remote places in the world to bring them back to themselves. You create those immersive, connective experiences where they find their inner compasses again. Mike, talk to us about your life and your work and what matters to you most.
Well, Stephanie, first off, I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm looking forward to our chat. Maybe I'll answer the final part of your question. What matters to me most? I'll answer that first. And that answer has obviously changed throughout my life,
Yeah.
and and that answer changed dramatically when I had children, and it was very different in my 20s, of course. And these days, what matters to me most, I think, is just it's doing the work to be the best human I can be. And I sort of look at that as a process of archaeology, of like really digging through all the sediment that's accumulated over my life to find out who I am at my core, what's true at my core, and act as much as possible from that place, rather than all the sediment is, to me, is just a metaphor for all the things that I've been told about who I should be and how I should be, all the traumas that have been inflicted on me over my life that drive these, sometimes unconscious behavior. So trying to remove as much of that possible and get to my truth inside that. And, if I can get a little bit psycho-spiritual or whatever, the truth at the core of that is love. When I sift through all of that stuff, and remove as much of it as possible, I'm removing barriers to love, and I become a more loving human being to everyone around me, and my kids and my partner and my friends and strangers on the street. And so that is to me the most important, what matters to me most these days, and even more so than my kids, because if I commit to that work, I show up better for my kids, and I love them more, and I do more for them. So that's what matters to me most. And as for my life, my life is interspersed with incredible travel to wild and remote places all over the earth. And what's interesting is this very stark duality of these incredible experiences, really wild places, and then just a pretty normal, average, boring life here in Toronto. I took my kids to the movies last night and took my dog for a walk this morning. And then 3 weeks ago, I was in the desert in Saudi Arabia while a war broke out. So very, very dramatic contrasts in my life.
Yeah. Mike, so talk to us about Wayfinders. Talk to us about what the Wayfinders Guide to Life is and to work, and the work that you do and the spaces you create and the experiences that come out of that.
Yeah, thank you. So, in a nutshell, I sometimes describe my work as I take entrepreneurs to faraway places and I make them cry, and which is not far off the truth sometimes. But I take people to very deliberate places that are usually quite off the beaten path, remote places where we can step really far out of the familiar, out of our normal context. And when I do that, for myself or for others, it creates a context where I can slow down, where I can be still, where I can listen to, the more subtle messages that are coming through that the busyness of life often crowds out. And I create these contexts where people can connect on a very deep level and explore big, meaningful questions, such as who am I at my core, and what is my work to do here in the world? What are the gifts that I have to share with the world, and where am I out of alignment? Questions like that. And on the surface, it looks like it's a really cool adventure and it's a cool travel experience, and there's certainly plenty of that. But that is just the delivery mechanism for what is hopefully a much deeper and more profound experience. an experience of, really, really deep connection. Because when you're posing big questions to people and you're putting them in pairs or in small groups or whatever to discuss it, and you're asking people to share things maybe that they're struggling with, it creates a safe place for vulnerability, and vulnerability is a crucial ingredient in connection. And so people tend to connect on a much deeper level. And we have these really cool experiences, like visiting a remote village in Papua New Guinea and living with the people there, or living in a remote monastery in Bhutan and learning from the monks there. And so it's a very sort of unique thing, and it sits at the intersection of adventure and community and transformation. And I love the work that I do, and it's not without its challenges, right? Our experience in the Middle East, of course, was the most recent one. But I feel like it's very worthwhile work, and certainly, I've heard many stories of the impact it's had on people.
Mike, and we're gonna come back to this, but talk to us about these pivotal points that got you to where you are today, where you are creating those spaces for others, where they basically sort of can pull the handbrake, right, and take stock and reset.
Yeah, the pivotal moment or pivotal era, I guess, there were many moments in that era, but going back about 10 years, 10, 11 years, and I was running my previous company. It was an adventure travel company, and we ran high-end mountain bike trips around the world. And I'd been running that company for 20 years at the time. And if I were to rewind even 5 years before that, looking with the benefit of hindsight, I can see that I was becoming more and more out of alignment with that business. I'd started it straight out of university when I was living in the British Columbia Rockies, and really loved it for about 10 or 15 years. And we were expanding around the world, and I was traveling, and it was fun. But at a certain point, about 12, 15 years ago, I was becoming more and more dissatisfied with the business, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. It wasn't just the business, it was other aspects of life. But I thought the solution was, okay, well, I need to take on some more challenges. So I started raising money from investors. I took on more debt. I hired a team, started aggressively expanding, even faster than we already were. And I thought the solution was I need to create bigger goals and more exciting goals. And what I did in the process over those ensuing years is I took a wonderful lifestyle business and turned it into, this source of stress and often outright misery. It was just so stressful trying to run this business with so many people involved all over the world. And I eventually sold that company, and I'd started Wayfinders just before I sold it, and so there's a bit of an overlap of about a year when I was doing both. But I sold it so that I could focus on Wayfinders, and the genesis of it was really just I wanted to create a different sort of entrepreneur conference where, and been to lots of entrepreneur conferences, lots of speakers, workshops. You're typically at a conference center or a hotel or whatever. You're mostly indoors, and it's hard to make connections with that kind of format because there's usually somebody speaking on stage or in front of the room, so you can't connect to the person next to you without being rude. So I wanted to create something where the focus was on connection. And I knew that when you take people outside and you're doing fun, challenging things together, that people tend to bond. So that was the genesis of it. And I immediately really loved this new format of what I was creating because I got to create something really meaningful for people. I was directly involved. And over time, it morphed into, at the beginning, it was kind of more of a conference, plus adventure. We were still mostly talking, we'd go for a great hike or a bike ride or whatever, and then we'd come back and we'd have some panels and talk about business and whatnot. But then as I started taking people farther and farther away to places like Fiji and Greenland and, other places, I noticed that people were having these more profound experiences. It was an opportunity to reflect on their lives. It was an opportunity to be exposed to other cultures that have a radically different interpretation of how to live life and what's a meaningful human life. And so I leaned into that, about 5, 6 years ago. I really pivoted and leaned into up-leveling my skills as a facilitator and creating these, much richer, deeper, more profound experiences. And so it's been quite a ride.
Mike, so talk to us about what that connection does to people, the people who come on your trips. What is that? Because connection is the sort of it's the heart of what you do. It's the heart of what I do at WeCan. And I feel it's the heart of what a lot more people are up to. So a lot of people I know are thinking about how can we create, how can we make TED Talks into something more immersive and connective rather than this prescriptive sort of model, how can we make live events more immersive? How can we do this online, these conversations more immersive and more interactive and more connective? So what do you feel does that, this connection piece, both the connection that people rediscover to themselves and maybe through being with others?
Yeah. Well, there's a few threads that I want to pull on in that. One is, you mentioned TED Talks, and I've been to some TEDx talks, and I know people who go to the main TED conference, and it's like wonderful speakers, and for something like the main TED, which is I think 3 days or 4 days, whatever, to sit there in a theater and just listen to people go on, wonderful, inspiring, amazing talks, but that to me is not that interesting. And if I were designing a TED conference, I would have, somebody deliver their 18-minute inspiring talk or thought-provoking or whatever, and then I'd put people into small groups and I'd say, hey,
exactly.
Connect. What did this bring up for you, and how did this resonate for you or didn't or whatever? And then you have an opportunity to connect with these people over these really interesting ideas. Anyway, that's just my thought about TED. But we have a crisis of connection in the world, particularly in the West. And if you look at any of the stats regarding connection or loneliness, they're climbing dramatically. And in the UK where you live, I'm not sure if it's still. I think maybe they got rid of this position, but there used to be a minister of loneliness in the UK, particularly to tackle this problem because they recognized it was such a big issue.
Yeah.
And if you look at the data and the research on what chronic loneliness does to us, does to our mental well-being, does to our neurochemistry, does to our physical biology, it is up there. It is on the same level as chronic smoking.
Yeah.
So some studies say you would be better off having a well-connected life and smoking 2 packs a day than being a non-smoker and being chronically lonely. That's how impactful it is. And you think about the knock-on effects on society, with that. So we live in this era of disconnection, and a lot of the work that I do is around bringing people back to connection and true, genuine connection. And like I said, one of the ingredients in connection is vulnerability. If you're not willing to share of yourself, of your human experience, of your life, of your struggles, your dreams, you're going to remain at a surface level. And so, for some of the people, particularly people who come to Wayfinders for the first time, sometimes it can be a little bit, oh, okay, we're operating at that level. Oh, okay, I wasn't expecting that. And I try to do it gradually. It's not, I don't put people in a group and say, talk about, your most awful moment or whatever. But as people get comfortable with that, it feels like such a breath of fresh air to just be able to show up and be, I'm here, I'm myself, I'm my messy human self. And one of the biggest things is people realize, sometimes people are very guarded and they haven't had this level of connection or discussion or vulnerability with anyone, and they show up and they're with a group of people who are sharing openly, and they realize, oh my God, nobody's got their shit together. Everybody's struggling with somebody, and it feels, whatever struggle you're carrying, you don't have the additional struggle of shame or feeling like, oh my God, I don't have my act together and everybody else does. And so that can be very freeing. And the other thing that comes of this, and comes from my events, is this human mirroring effect where you see other people, if you're struggling with something in your relationship and then somebody else shares something about their own struggle with their relationship, it might actually unlock, I've seen so many aha moments
100%.
in conversation, Yeah, where somebody shares something like, "Oh my God, I never actually thought of it that way," and it's just like, boom, light bulb. And that's you get that through real, genuine human connection.
Yeah.
And so, and one of the things I do is I also try to teach people how to live with more connection in their own lives, and how to create connection for others. And so, I'm in the process right now here in Toronto with a couple of collaborators building out a community for entrepreneur dads here in Toronto, because this confluence of running a business and trying to be a good partner, a good father, whatever, it's really challenging. And also for women, of course, but this is my experience. And we found like there's a lot of entrepreneurial men out there with kids who really struggle and who need this. And so that's what we're trying to create. And it's frankly not that hard. Let's just get people together for, a breakfast or a dinner, or, go play pickleball together or whatever. And let's just create a context where we can just be open and share what's going on with the lives. And I think the more we can do that, we can start to restore connection, because we've fallen a little too in love with this cult of the individual, and the image of the lone hero or heroine. And that's really not how humans operate, or have operated. We've operated by relying on each other for thousands of years, and we need to restore that idea back.
I couldn't agree more. I think we're pack animals, and I feel this peer-to-peer learning, right? The amount of things we can learn from other humans is limitless, and we don't always need a professor or a teacher or an expert. We can share our stories, and there's so much learning coming from that, and we definitely experience that with WeCan. Where we haven't invested any money because it's not currently making a lot of money. And we get 10 million listeners from out of nowhere, which is, a sign that this resonates, just because you are sharing your story. And while you share your story, you're also sharing your insights. And that is so unbelievably helpful to others. And gives permission, of course, to feel the things, talk about the things, and potentially the ripple effect of those people then going out and doing the same things with others, which is even more powerful. Mike, what is your advice for an entrepreneur listening right now? And I would think that a lot of entrepreneurs, it can be a very lonely place, right? You're sort of at the top of this mountain, and you're supposed to rally the troops at all times, and everyone is following you in the direction that you think you need to go to. What is your advice for entrepreneurs? Of course, if this really resonates, sign up to a Wayfinders trip, go and be connected with you, Mike, and the groups that you put together. But sort of, high level advice for someone listening right now.
Well, my first advice would be go for a walk in the woods. And I say that a little bit cheekily, but there's so much value from just being on your own, connecting to yourself in nature, in quiet places, and just most entrepreneurs I know, they've just got their foot on the gas all the time. It's go, go, go. And if you throw kids into the mix, it's like very little free time for themselves. Yeah. And just carving out some time to just be with yourself and connect with yourself and get quiet enough to be able to listen to what's going on in your heart, what's going on in your soul. That's really vitally important. And the more you can, the more time you can set aside for that, the better. And it doesn't have to be, in the middle of the desert in Mongolia, the desert in Saudi Arabia. It could be, your local park or something like that. That ability to connect to oneself and to listen to oneself and to know oneself, that then leads to, the second thing I would say, which is around human to human connection. And I find the more I can get to know myself, and the more I can connect to myself, the more genuine and the more nourishing my relationships with other humans are, because I'm coming to those relationships with a real genuine sense of who I am, which makes it easier for me to identify who are the people that I really resonate with and who are the people that are going to really resonate with me, because I'm not pretending to be somebody other than who I am. And then I can find my kindred souls. And so my advice would be, as entrepreneurs, it's so easy to get in that lone wolf mode, because like you said, we're at the top. We can't it doesn't really feel right to like try and, connect with our staff. It's a different thing. And we don't really have any peers in our workplace. But there's so many groups out there for entrepreneurs. There's entrepreneurs organizations, there's YPO, there's all sorts of other ones, there's local ones, whatever. There's so many options to join a community where you can connect with peers, and it's so easy to create your own community. If you know another entrepreneur living in your city or your town or whatever, just say, hey, you want to get together for a coffee every Wednesday morning, and start there. And then if they know somebody else who might enjoy that, say, hey, bring them along too. And I really love recurring connection opportunities. Just set it and forget it. It's like, hey, Wednesday morning, coffee at this place. You send it out to 15 people and say, hey, whoever can make it, show up. And some weeks you might show up and there's 2 people, and some weeks there might be 10 people. But it's just, a bunch of people that share a similar vibe, share similar concerns, share similar views on the world, whatever, an opportunity to just connect and share. And, I've gotten so much value from the communities that I've been a part of, both personally and professionally. It's so easy to get into a silo when you're an entrepreneur, and you're only seeing, it's like that metaphor of the blind man and the elephant, and one's holding the tail and they think it's this animal, and one's holding the trunk, and you can only see a small picture. But when you surround yourself with other people, you start to see a bigger picture of your life, of whatever else there is. So that would be my main advice. Go for a walk and connect with some other people.
Mike, as I'm listening to you, I'm wondering what your insight is around, working in this alignment space where you essentially, aligning yourself, as in we are all on this journey of life where we, continue every year to get to know ourselves better and to try and align ourselves more with who we truly are. This is a transformative space, and you work in that space, and you have people for a limited amount of time. What are those human insights that you could tell our audiences? And there are many young people in this audience that I think, they're maybe school leavers or uni leavers, and they look at this world and it's not an easy place to be in right now. What would you tell them? What are those human insights into the work that you do, and this human to human sort of experience, or the lessons that you learned?
Yeah, such a rich question, and there's a few ways to approach that answer. One that there's an answer I might have given you 2 or 3 years ago, and there's an answer I'll give you now in light of the world that we live in, particularly around AI. And I have one child who's going into university next year, and 2 more that are 2 years behind her. And so we've been having these discussions about like, hey, what is the world going to look like in 5 years or 7 years when you're in the workforce? And obviously, we know AI is going to disrupt a lot of work, and I think that the question I've been sitting with is like, what are going to be the roles of humans in that world, and what are the unique gifts and strengths that humans can bring? We're still going to need humans. Maybe we zoom out 20 or 30 years, and AI and robots will do everything. And who knows what that world will be. But over the next 10, 15 years, we're still very much going to need humans, and we're going to need them to do very human things. And the thing that sits beneath that is, for me, the work that I do is helping people get into alignment. And alignment is just, again, it's just shorthand for really knowing yourself and knowing who you are at a core and soul level. And when you show up to work and when you show up to life from that place, it's a very different place to operate from. Yeah. And I found, contrasting my previous business where I was burnt out, I was out of alignment in the last, 5 to 7 years of that company. And it was a grind, and I kept having to throw more and more money at it. And it was harder and harder, but I didn't recognize that I was out of alignment. And and so, the messaging and how I spoke about it and how I talked to customers and whatever, it just didn't feel, there wasn't that genuine sense of this is who I am and I'm speaking passionately from my core. It was like I was trying to fit into a box that no longer fit.
Yeah.
And with this business, this is something that springs forth directly from my soul and from my deepest longings and desires and passions and skills. And so it's much easier to speak about, to get excited about, to inspire excitement in others. And there's been so much more flow and so much more ease with this business as a result. And one of the things that I tell people when I'm coaching them or when I'm facilitating is you need to express your gifts in the world. And everybody has gifts. And that doesn't necessarily mean your gifts have to lead directly to financial compensation or a career or a job or whatever. But there's something in you that is asking to come out. And the more you ignore that, the greater the psychic and physiological and mental cost there will be when that part of you doesn't find expression. And I also tell people that one of the, that saying, your greatest wound, your greatest gift lies next to your greatest wound. And I would sort of reword that as your greatest gift can come from your greatest wound. And so to give you a concrete example from my life, I grew up feeling very alienated and disconnected and not having much of a sense of belonging anywhere, including within my own family, but especially at school and other places. And that sense of alienation followed me into my adult life, into my 20s and into my 30s. And it wasn't until I had friends and I had some good friends, but I always felt, no matter where I was, I always felt this sense of like, I'm not quite here. I'm not quite in this. I don't feel like I belong. And it wasn't until I started doing the work that I started to remove some of those stories. But that core wound still remains, no matter how much work I do. It's still there. It's transmuted. It's much. I'm come at it from a much healthier place. But that drives my work, and it's no coincidence that my work is to create more connection in the world when I suffered from such a profound lack of it. But that's my driver, and that's my motivation, because I know that pain so acutely, and I want to lessen it for others. And so, if you do the work of understanding yourself and what were some of the, the things that shaped you and wounded you and whatever, and come at, and express the gifts from that place, it's transformative both for you and the world and the people around you. But you need to do the work, right? There's so many coaches and healers and whatever in the world who are still deeply wounded. And there's no end point. There's where okay, I've done it. Now I can start being a coach or a healer, a therapist or whatever. But you can't be, I think the saying is like, do the work from the scar, not the wound, right? And so if it's still an open wound, there's some more work to do. But it can be such a powerful place. And some of the most incredible people I know doing the most incredible work in the world have suffered some of the most profound wounds, and it's transformed them, and they've alchemized those wounds into something really beautiful.
Yeah. Mike, you said this so beautifully, and we share the same core wound 100%. I sometimes struggle with this, especially young people, the ones when I go into schools or universities, they get told the whole time, what are your gifts, and to follow that track. And they often are overwhelmed by that because they don't necessarily know what their gifts are, right? So I always think we need to decode that. And sometimes, or this has been surely one of our other role models that, said, whatever feels like real joy and not necessarily just hard work, follow that path, whatever that is. And sometimes when you really don't know, it's a process of elimination. You start the things that are in your path that are available to you, and you just go on this path and you learn the things that aren't for you, and you will get to the things that are for you in the end. And I always think that's really helpful because we have adopted a little bit as parents also this thing, oh, we just want our children to be happy. Well, that's a tall order, that's a massive thing. Actually, they don't know what that means. They often don't know what the next step is, and they don't know what actually makes them happy. And so I feel this is really important that we sort of decode this a little bit for the younger generations that are often overwhelmed with that. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say, the acronym FAFO, F around and find out.
Yes.
I really love and this process, and I preach it over and over. It's just experiment, run some experiments, just play around. I have a friend who is also my coach, and couple years ago, he works with people on an energetic level, and he's very intuitive, and he senses energies. And I won't go too deep into how he does his work or whatever, but it's very what we would call woo woo. But wow, is it incredibly effective? And he is also a very successful entrepreneur. He and his brothers built like $50 million company, but he was tired of that work. And a couple of years ago, he wanted to get into this coaching world, and he was getting really hung up on the business model, and wanted to write a business plan and all these things. And he was going through that process for several months. And I said, his name's Alon, and I said, Alon, just play around, just treat it as play. Find some people who you can experiment with, who want to experiment with you, and just see what happens. And we met for coffee, a couple of weeks later. It's like, oh my God, I put the call out, and I had, four friends take me up on the offer, and it was so joyful, and it was so powerful. And then he just kept experimenting. He experimented with some group stuff, and he experimented with one-on-ones, and experimented with, all sorts of different things. And now he's like, turning people away, because he's in such high demand, and he's loving it, and it lights him up. And every time I see him, he's like, oh my God, I just love this so much, right? And so we need to decrease that pressure a little bit, and just treat it as play. And maybe we have no idea, it's like, okay, I'm going to take a dance class, and I'm going to sign up for this course, and I'm going to join this community group. Just play around and see what lights you up, and follow the breadcrumbs, and they will eventually take you somewhere. But don't worry about, it's a process. It can take years, and don't worry about figuring it out right away. Just play around. In the process, you'll probably have a lot of fun too.
Exactly. So what does success look like for you, Mike?
Success is expressing myself and my gifts in the world with some amazing people at my side, and just sharing my gifts to the world, because I know that makes the world a better place for the people that it touches. And if I can create a life where I get to spend a significant amount of time doing that, then that is, to me, very successful.
Yeah. So what are the sort of tips you give to your children, Mike? What are your high level, tips of what- whatever tricks or advice? What do you tell them when they come up to something where they are sort of challenged?
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty straight up about it. I don't want to sell them a version of life and adulthood that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And I tell them, life is going to present a lot of challenges to you over the years. And, I invite them to, this is my frame on struggle and challenge, that every challenge or struggle is an opportunity, and it's a gift. And it's an opportunity to learn something about yourself, to grow, to evolve. And if I look at the biggest struggles in my life, they have been so incredibly painful in the moment, and each one of them has led me to something beautiful, a better version of myself, a better outcome, a better way of being in the world. And in my early 30s, I went through a soul-crushing 2.5-year depression. I was near suicidal. It was at the time it was absolutely agonizing, and I am now so incredibly grateful for that experience, and because of who I became in the process. and I wouldn't wish it on anybody. It was so painful, but it's, I think, an unfortunate aspect of being human that is how evolution happens. I don't see too many aspects of, I don't see too many examples of people growing while smiling. Usually the growth requires, we're served up a dish of something very, very painful. And it's up to us to alchemize that into something meaningful and beautiful and worthwhile that takes us to our next evolution. And so I try and tell kids, like, hey, life is going to keep giving you struggle. It's going to keep giving you challenges. And it's how you frame that and how you meet that. And just try and think, okay, life is giving me something. It's giving me an opportunity here. And maybe you won't know it right away, and it's just going to feel like, oh my God, why is this happening to me? But there is almost certainly an aspect of it happening for you. And I don't really subscribe to the idea of everything happens for a reason, because I don't want to believe that, children get murdered for a reason. But I that's not the type of worldview I want to subscribe to. But I do believe that we have the ability as humans to make meaning from almost any situation and to take value from it. And so, my dad got sick with brain cancer when I was 14, and he died when I was 16. I wish he was with me every single day of my life. But I also know that experience of losing my father at a young age shaped who I am today, shaped how I show up in the world, shaped the work I do, shaped everything about me. And I would definitely trade it all away to have my dad with me. But I can also, it wasn't just an adverse, terrible incident that was just terrible. It also brought a lot of gifts with it. And so that is what I try and tell my kids, about struggle and challenge, is that there's a gift hidden within there, and just try and be open to the gift.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing so beautifully, Mike. So talk to us about the plans and the goals and Wayfinders in 2026 and beyond.
Yeah, so in late May, I'm taking a group to this beautiful remote resort in Iceland with my friend and co-collaborator Philip McKernan, who's a wonderful, incredibly gifted coach based in Ireland. And so we're leading a 6-day event, and the theme of that is resilience, and how do we build inner resilience for what are and will continue to be chaotic times. And then in October, I'm taking a group back to Bhutan. It'll be my 3rd event in Bhutan, and I'm quite looking forward. And we'll be spending time with some of my old friends at the monastery, and just, it's one of the most beautiful, incredible countries on earth. And in about a month, I'll be announcing my 2027 events, and I still haven't finalized that, but I've got a wonderful short list of places, and I've been scouting, and so I'm excited about that, and who knows what else will be on the horizon.
Incredible. So how can we support you, Mike?
Well, you can go to way-finders.com and you can learn more about me. I'm going to be over the coming months, I'm going to be getting back to, I used to do these monthly talks called Soul Talks. And it was just an opportunity for entrepreneurs to get together and talk about, these meaningful topics. It'll be relaunching again soon in the next month or so under a different name, slightly different approach. But I really love, whether it's getting people together in person or whether it's getting together on a Zoom call, I just love getting people together and giving them an opportunity to really connect on a heart to heart and soul to soul level. So, people can support me by joining, and that'll be posted on the website as well.
Perfect. Mike, if you had to sum your story up, what are the takeaways you want our listeners to really remember?
I think, for me, the biggest takeaway has been just what I shared to you about, the lesson to my children is that all of the struggles and all of the challenges of my life have been part of this beautiful journey of taking me to who I am today. And as Steve Jobs said, you can't connect the dots looking forward, only looking back. And I can look back at all these things that felt so hard and difficult in the moment, and that have now become this beautiful part of what I think is an interesting and beautiful story. And I know that there'll be more of these, coming up. And what I'm grateful for is that I now have developed the wisdom to be able to recognize in the moment, while something, maybe challenging or painful is happening, that there's an opportunity here. There's a gift being given to me here. And so I'm much more attuned to that and open to that now. And I pay attention to clues, and I try and parse out the story and what is the gift and what is the opportunity there? And that to me has been such a interesting thread to follow throughout my life, and keeps leading me to more evolution and more meaning and more beauty. And I also wish, sometimes I'm think like, okay, I'm good. I don't need any more. I would like to just coast now for a bit, but the challenges keep coming, and they're beautiful and they're wonderful. And each one of them, it feels like a continual journey towards a truer and truer version of myself. And if at the end of my life I can look back and say, I lived very committed to becoming the truest version of myself, and if I die knowing that I really know who I am and I live accordingly, that'll feel like a good life to me.
Definitely. Mike, I'm so grateful for you, for everything that you are and everything that you do, and for this beautiful conversation. I would love to encourage everyone to give us feedback. What resonated with you? What did you learn? And definitely F around and play around and make that your mission for a little bit.
Thank you.